Greetings and welcome to the Mount Rushmore podcast. My name is Jeff, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friends Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Richard and Michael debate and deliberate the most ubiquitous aspects of many different topics. And this week, they are going to be joining forces in fierce competition against an interloper who is actually quite an expert. He's a journalist, and he has a wonderful website called worstgig.com. But really, this is a site that's related to a book called Worst Gig. So I'm going to let him introduce the site and the book, and I'm going to give him a hearty welcome. Please welcome Jon Niccum. How are you doing, John?
Oh, great to hear from you, Jeff. This is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah,
always
man.
Fun talking about terrible things, terrible experiences.
It is. You know, this isn't our most... This isn't our best holiday programming choice, I would say. The topic is the Mount Rushmore of the worst gigs. Tell us what's at worstgig.com, Jon Niccum.
Sure. I've been collecting stories from my interviews with famous musicians since pretty much the late 90s, where I asked them the simple question, what's the worst show you've ever played? And this is a collection, the website and the book, of their worst gigs. And, you know, for some people, a worst gig can be fan related. It can be weather related. It can be violence related, sickness related. Who knows? But I've been cataloging these for quite a while, and I think I've got a pretty good collection of truly awful experiences.
Oh, that's wonderful. I have perused the website, and I'm going to order the book. And you know what? That's what makes this a holiday episode, is because it's our gift guide. The Mount Rushmore gift guide contains one item, the book, or the worst gig, which is...
What's funny is it always sells really well around December.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I track the sales every week, and it's one of those, they call it a perennial, you know, where you can, it's not really a dated topic. It's something that everybody can relate to every year.
Hey, that's cool. So one can go to the website, worstgig.com, and from there you can launch off and go to the social media handles. But heck, you might as well just go to the button there on Amazon.com or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or all these places where you can buy that book and gift it and get it and all those things. So promo portion over. Well, no, we're going to do it again at the end. But promo portion done for now, and we'll move on into the actual game. So, Michael and Richard, I think our guest is going to go first. John, what's your first choice of the four you'll choose for the Mount Rushmore of the worst gig?
Oh, gosh, you know, narrowing this down was very tricky. Okay. And I'm going to start with one by guitarist Joe Satriani. Are you guys familiar with him?
Sure.
Satch.
Yeah,
Yes.
Shred.
Well, Joe Satriani, back in the day, was playing a show in Malaysia. And it was one of those big festival stadium shows with Jethro Tull and Sugar Ray and Toto, a very odd selection of bands. And for whatever reason, it kept running later and later. So he went to sleep, and about 4 a.m, he gets awoken, or is it awakened? One of the two. And they said, you're going on. So he gets up there, starts playing, and then he starts going into his song, Satch Boogie. And all of a sudden, the Malaysian army takes the stage with machine guns.
Wow.
Pointing machine guns at everybody and says, you need to stop playing now, or we are going to shoot. Apparently there was some kind of coup happening, and they were on stage either to make sure it didn't happen or make sure it did happen. One of the two. He wasn't entirely sure. So he basically handed his guitar to his tech and grabbed his suitcase, and they immediately drove to the airport and got out of the country.
Wow. So you heard this firsthand from Joe himself?
Yeah, all these stories are me personally interviewing them.
Wow. Did his face turn white? Did he go off into this distant place of horror, or was it just all in a day's work?
You know, as a former musician, everybody has bad gigs, but there's a bad gig and there's a gig in a foreign country in a language you don't speak, where an army comes on stage with machine guns and says, we'll kill you. And to me, that's a whole next level.
Yeah, I guess trying to follow for Whitesnake is hard, but like, but they don't have machine guns pointed at you. Wow, that's intense. Do you Do you personally have any bad gig stories? And if so, is that something we can hear a little bit
Oh
later?
yeah,
Jen? Okay.
I'll be. In fact, it's included in the book, but I've got a particularly good bad story.
Okay. All right. We'll entice our audience to stay and hang in there throughout the whole podcast. So guys, Michael, Richard, who's going to go?
I'm going to go first. And I have 0 interviews with famous musicians, so this is all basically based off of Wikipedia as per usual. No, our first choice is the 1983 US Festival.
Oh.
I don't know if you guys were Jeff, you may be old enough to remember this.
I was just watching some of it on the cable channel that is Night Flight now is replaying everything. So yeah. Oh yeah. I saw some US Festival.
So it started in 1982. Steve Wozniacki,
yeah,
the founder of Apple, basically had this idea to spend millions of dollars to get all of his favorite bands on stage at Glen Helen Pavilion down here in Southern California. And it was a huge flop in its own way. It didn't make money, but that didn't stop him from wanting to do the whole thing again in 1983. They broke it into 3 different days. The first day was New Wave, headlined by The Clash. Second day was Heavy Metal, headlined by Van Halen. And the third day was Rock, headlined by David Bowie. Now, as a side note, and this becomes interesting, this becomes important in the story. Van Halen was paid $1 million, which was some sort of record deal at the time, to come play this one gig. Woz decides that he wants David Bowie to play, and he is adamant about this, even though David Bowie is also going to cost $1 million. Fine, they go out and get him. Van Halen finds out about this. They have some sort of favored nations clause in their contract that says they have to be the highest paid performer at the gig. So they put their foot down and say, no, you have to pay us another $500,000 or else we're not going to play. He pays for that.
Jeez.
So this is all happening while the Clash have been paid $500,000 for the gig. They find out about this, and the Clash being the Clash, they decide to make a political statement about it. And hold a press conference where they basically demand that these big name artists give a percentage of their money to charity. Whether or not this actually happened, kind of hard to say. So the Clash, this winds up becoming Mick Jones's last show with the Clash.
Mm-hmm.
And they get on stage and they do a very hostile show. They're not talking to each other. Joe Strummer is antagonizing the crowd, and not in that kind of like fun punk rock sort of antagonizing way, in like I really don't want to be here and I'm cashing my paycheck sort of way.
Yeah.
And they start complaining about all the commercialism of the gig and, you know, how much money that these artists were making. So at some point near the end of the set, on the multimedia screen behind them, the crew went and put a copy of the $500,000 check that they received for playing the gig and just put it up there for everybody to see.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Needless to say, there was not an encore that night. And the Clash, as we knew it, broke up immediately afterward.
Wow. Not the London working stiffs that they were all kind of posturing as. I imagine the Clash could also probably summon the Malaysian army if they needed to, if not Sandinistas. So
yeah, they had the fatigues. So
yeah. Wow. I think, was it US Festival? I forget what it was. Which was the one that I don't think Elton John remembers even performing at it. And was that the one where Phil Collins played once in London and then once?
That was Live Aid.
That was Live Aid. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember as a kid seeing this all happen. A kid, I don't know, I was junior in high school, seeing it all happen and then thinking it felt like a Pepsi Clear ad, the whole thing. Just so 80s, barfing all over our TV. Yeah, that was Van Halen was, I think some of their writer notoriously has the no brown M&Ms clause within it, that if you can believe David Lee Roth having a justification for something as diva-esque as that, but actually saying that, you know, they have these huge they have a huge front line. So if anything goes wrong with all these trusses and Marshall stacks, or I don't know, Eddie was PV powered stacks or whatever, they're going to die because of all the infrastructure that they have. So David Lee Roth was saying, we want detail-oriented people to put our shows on. So that's why we say no brown M&Ms, because if they're not paying attention to the M&Ms, they're not paying attention to the fact that we need a stage that can support 50 tons of frontline gear. So,
by the way, Mr. Professional David Lee Roth showed up 3 hours late to the gig. Bombed to the point where he could barely stand and slurred his way through the show. So let's keep that in mind when we're talking about brown M&Ms.
Yeah. Crazy from the heat. Okay. All right. So Jon Niccum, what's your second choice?
My second choice, this one's kind of sad, but I wanted to go with this one anyway. I interviewed Graham Nash.
Sad like four white men podcasting sad? Okay,
that's not so much sad as it is
pathetic.
Expected.
Okay, expected. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You interviewed Graham Nash. How awesome is that?
Yeah, it was really cool. His book and my book came out the same week, and his book kept my book out of the #1 spot in Amazon. Wow. So I got to #2 in the U.S., but I got to #1 in Canada, so that was fun.
Oh, cool.
But I asked him what's the worst gig he ever played. Mm-hmm. And he had a story that really struck with me. But they were doing a tour in the 80s. And, of course, he's part of Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. And at the time, David Crosby was having an incredible drug problem with cocaine and other substances. So for this tour, in order to get him to play these shows with them, because it was a sold out, reunion type tour, they built a small room off to the side of the stage every night that they played so he could go and get high between songs.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things that Graham told me was that he felt really conflicted because music was such a great part of David's life that he didn't want to take that away from him. But by doing these sold out shows, he was getting more money to get deeper into drugs.
Oh.
So his quote to me was, when I asked him what's the worst gig you ever played, he said, my answer to that question is not a show, but a tour. Every show was like that, moment by moment. Every show was the worst we ever played.
Wow. And around what era? Because they've been.
That was early 80s, like
okay.
82, I think is when that tour was.
Is it a CSN or CSNY? Do you know?
I don't think Young was with them at that point.
Okay. Wow, that's rough. And to see somebody, so David Crosby is kind of notoriously the kind of glue, the harmonic glue that held the Byrds and Crosby, Stills, and Nash together. And to see this guy almost like the Belushi of the SNL ensemble, just the thing that he loves and was put on this planet to do is just killing him. So what a horrible thing for Graham to witness.
Most of these stories are just either terrifying or hilarious or whatever, but for whatever reason, there was an emotional resonance to that story that I just had to include it on the Mount Rushmore.
Mm-hmm. Well, that definitely goes deeper than, whether they are celebrities and whether they're somewhat coddled and whether they dwell in a kind of a world that many of us wish we could be in. Being a rock star can be a very hard gig. And to also have to see a person who's a brother who would get more mired in substance challenges. God, that must be devastating. That's horrible. Way to bring it down. All right. So,
we'll bring it back up. Don't worry.
Okay, cool. Michael and Richard.
Oh, not yet. Oh.
Going down.
When Richard and I were talking about we weren't sure if this was like personal experiences at a concert or just like in general catastrophe. So I have kind of a personal experience, and that is not seeing Cat Power in 2006, which was a very common thing for people to not have.
It clipped off a little bit.
Uh-oh. Michael?
I'm gonna message him in chat.
Yep.
John, are you still on?
Yep, still good.
John, whereabouts do you live in Lawrence?
22nd New Hampshire, right on the corner of New Hampshire and 23rd.
Cool.
Sorry,
Michael?
sorry, that just dropped and then came back up.
Okay. So the last thing I heard, I don't know
What
about
was
you
it?
guys, was you were about to say not seeing cat power was something that happened to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. All right. So, and not seeing cat power was something that happened to a lot of people, especially in kind of like the mid 2000s when she kind of was kind of engaged in not only like had like a substance abuse issue, but also just like this tremendous stage fright. And, you know, she's this tremendous singer songwriter, but at the same time, she's a very kind of fragile person and fragile performer. And I saw her a couple years earlier in Seattle, and I don't remember any sort of those things happening, but you just started hearing like, as she was like touring again, or as I was going to go see her, you started hearing the things of like, oh, she canceled, or she kind of walks off the stage often, and either mid song sometimes, or just leaves, you know, shows are kind of half finished. And, you know, talking about Graham Nash as someone that obviously had his own demons, I think rock stars are like these very, you know, talented people, but they're very fragile. And I can't think of like cat power without thinking of like the same sort of like, oh, she's such a beautiful musician, but like, or, you know, writes such beautiful songs and has such a beautiful voice, but then she's also like just super challenged on stage.
Yeah. Oh, that's disappointing. How did you feel as an audience member? Did you know
not seeing her?
Well,
I remember thinking like, oh, of course she's gonna cancel another show. Of course it's gonna, you know, we're gonna be disappointed. But you know, I don't think I understood as I do now that it was built on like a stage fright and built on like an alcoholism or other substance issues, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's really fascinating. Kind of definitely a worst gig from an audience standpoint. And then at that moment, I can imagine it's the worst gig for that person too, because they feel the pressure to entertain. They don't have the resources as an artist on the road doesn't, to be near family, to be near maybe a counselor or some way to make life normal, so you can start to get back to a place of normal. So, oh, that's rotten. And at that point, so it's not like she's a super big rock star at that point. So it's not like if it's David Crosby, you know, he's got this huge legacy and career behind him. She's still making her name.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. All right, so Duders, there is an awesome thing you can do. You can go to worstgig.com, and then there you can visit the Facebook, which is facebook.com worstgig, and you can go out and chase down the Twitter, which is @worstgig. And John, what happens on all those places out on social media?
I don't know that it's anything particularly interesting happens on the social media.
Okay, good enough.
I mean, you know, I put out news stories, you know, quite often, and tweet out when someone mentions, you know, the worst gig, et cetera. I found one recently. Tom Morello, the guitarist for
Rage. Oh yeah.
He just did this master's class series, and in his booklet, he has a section about bad gigs, and he has a whole thing about worst gig, and gives a shout out to me and says, you know, check out the book, check out the site. So every now and then, you know, you're still getting love from all these musicians who's heard about this and appreciate the site.
Well, that's cool. Tom is like the Ubermensch of rock too, so it's pretty amazing guy. Yeah. Well, that's super cool. So, you know, you can give the gift of the worst. You can give the worst gift this year. Give your friends the worst gift by going to Amazon or any other bookseller. Actually, support a local bookseller if you can. They're doing have as much of a rough time as everybody else is, and buying that book and giving it out to your friend who's either a fan of music or just a fan of entertainment stories of the when things go wrong. So you could also do us a solid and go to the place where you got this podcast and go back and dig through our past episodes and download, rate, and review previous episodes. We'd love for you to also share them. We have social media sites too, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and something you can do there is you could suggest future topics. So that would be super cool. We'd love to jump out of our kind of brains and the things that we choose to do and jump into your brain and hear what we suggest, because previous people who have done that have ended up being on the show. You don't have to, but you could. Who knows? It's Zoom. We can find you. We can talk to you. So there's that. And we're going to go to our second half with Jon Niccum, author of Worst Gig, telling us his third choice for the worst gig ever.
You ready?
Lay it on us.
All right. This one is not a downer. This one is, in my opinion, hilarious. I think one of the things that is particularly appalling when you're playing a show is the level in which people aren't paying attention to you. So this is one of those stories that I love. This is by the band Cowboy Junkies, which was
Nice.
from Toronto. And they were kind of known as this very quiet, kind of introspective, elegant band. Well, they got signed in 1989, and they were considered by RCA to be one of these big signings. So they were flown out to this meeting that they had in Marbella, Spain, where all the record executives would go up to the top of this mountain, and where there was this like private bull ring and a dining area, and they'd showcase some of the bands. So they take the band out here, and by this point, all the record executives have been there for hours, and they can't leave because you have to be bussed up to this mountain, and the buses kind of drop you off and don't return until the event's over. So not only have they been there for a conference and having speeches and eating, they've been drinking all day. So all of them are completely hammered. Well, the head of the label goes up to Margot Timmons, who's the lead singer for Cowboy Junkies, and says, "I really want you to sing this song, Mining for Gold, to start out with." Well, this is an a cappella song, meaning she's just going to go out and sing it by herself with no musical accompaniment. She's really nervous about it. She's really shy. Keep in mind, their record's not even out yet. They're nobodies at this point. But she decides to go out there and sing this thing. So she gets out there, and the way she described it is everybody is flat out drunk, or they're talking, or they're literally asleep. In fact, there's a guy sitting right in front of her who is open mouth snoring, and his snoring is as loud as her singing voice at this point. So she's trying to power through this gig, and it's just falling apart. No one's paying attention. And so she decides, I've got to do something to make this thing worse. I'm not gonna, have my career torpedoed in front of their label head, right? So she focuses on the very back room. She sees this guy, the one guy in the room who's paying attention. So she just starts singing to him. And she's like, he's got a really big head. And so I'm focusing on his head. And then the more she sings to him, the more it comes into focus. And she realizes, hey, I know that guy. That's Gene Simmons of Kiss.
Does have a really big head.
Yes. And he's the only one there paying attention, but she powers through the gig. And afterwards, he comes up to her, and she's kind of complaining. And he goes, you know what? I know that gig. That's a bad gig. I was there with you, kid. And so it made it better for her.
Wow. Is that the first Nice Guy Gene Simmons story you've ever heard?
I have only heard stories that involve how much money he is involved with and obsessed with. Oh. He is the type of guy, cross my palms with silver. He wants to get paid for everything they do. Yeah. So it was nice to hear that he just was supporting a fellow musician.
Yeah, that's super cool. The empathy that one artist has for another. And and the ability to identify with that rough situation. I as part-time stand-up comic, we tend to have the opposite. It's like if you see somebody going down, you join in the heckling of that person. you pick up a rock and pelt them with all of the other Shirley Jackson people. So what were you going to say, Richard?
I was going to say that whole story just sounds like the travails of being the opening act, like times 1,000.
Oh yeah,
basically.
Yeah, so rough, but that's really interesting. I can't imagine, they just seem so introspective in such a kind of a twee kind of group that just doesn't seem like you want to be AC/DC in that story. You don't want to be the Cowboy Junkies. So.
You want a Marshall Stack in that story.
Yeah, you totally do. Okay, what do you got, Richard and Michael?
All right, so for our third choice, and John, when you mentioned Graham Nash, I thought that we would have a duplicate pick here because my third pick is the Altamont Festival from 1969. And Crosby, Stills, and Nash were at the gig, were one of the bands that were featured. I'm not going to talk too much about the Rolling Stones and the death of Meredith Hunter. That's been covered. There's a freaking movie that essentially is about it. I would like to talk about one of the worst things that could happen to you at a gig, which is being knocked unconscious at your own gig, which is what happened to poor Marty Ballin of Jefferson Airplane. They were one of the first bands that were part of the festival, and the Rolling Stones had famously hired Hell's Angels to act as security for the festival, and paid them in beer, which they proceeded to drink copious amounts of before the show even started. So by the time that they were supposed to be doing security, they were good and liquored up, along with whatever else was going on. And there's at some point during the beginning of the Jefferson Airplane performance, there's a scuffle. Marty Balin goes in there to try to break it up. Hell's Angel just turns around and cold cocks him, knocks him out cold.
Wow.
That's a bad gig.
Yeah.
So they have to. I think they get him kind of up and upright, but he's sort of done for the rest of the show. And Paul Cantor is the guitar player, and I think the lead songwriter for Jefferson Airplane, is basically gets up there and says to the crowd, so just in case you're wondering, the Hells Angels just knocked out our lead singer, so that's nice. And almost gets into a fight with the Hells Angels himself. Later on, you mentioned Graham Nash, John. Crosby, Stills, and Nash are playing a gig, and Stephen Stills is playing guitar and suddenly realizes that he is being stabbed multiple times in the leg by a drunk Hells Angel who has sharpened a bicycle spoke and just thought it would be funny to start stabbing the guitar player.
Man.
So again, the lesson... I noticed that both of my choices were festival gigs.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like that's a running thing. I could have talked about Woodstock, the original Woodstock. Could have talked about the attempted reboot of Woodstock. Mudstock, exactly. Don't play a festival show. It's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Just bad things happen when you play a festival, especially one that's security is Hells Angels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is the fox guarding the hen house. That's try to prevent any trouble from happening. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, those are the guys that you want on your side if you want to keep things calm.
What is it about festivals? Is they happen in often improvised venues. They are days long. Sometimes the crowd has ample time to get intoxicated and rowdy. It doesn't. Those are all mitigating factors. Is there something else you can think of, Richard?
Yeah, I think that a performance venue is sort of a hermetically sealed place, and that's why musicians have writers. Mm-hmm. Is because they have things that need to happen a certain way, and there's an expectation that when they show up to they will show up hopefully if they're not Van Halen at this time, and this all will be set up for them, and this is what they need to be able to do their job. And that just goes all out the window, it seems, with the majority of festivals. Mm-hmm. The planning is scattershot. The ability to be able to stage manage seems to go out the window, and it just seems to create an environment of chaos.
Yeah.
I would add one other reason that these things seem to invite controversy, which is when you're buying a ticket to see a band that you want to see, you're on their side. But the problem with these festivals is you're buying a ticket to a whole bunch of bands you may not want to see also. So you've got typically a mix of the wrong crowd also with a bunch of these bands.
Okay. Yeah. You're there for Air Supply, they're there for Alice Cooper, and you're like, oh, what do I do? Yeah.
I love that festival.
I love that festival. The triple sponsored by AAA. Yeah. John, I don't want to end this conversation without knowing your worst gig, and I think this might be the time to say it since we're about to hit your fourth choice. So, or a bad gig story.
You want me to do my personal story? Of course.
Yeah, lay it on us. Yeah.
All right. I was in a band called Easter Day, which was also the last name of our lead singer or songwriter.
Yeah, my sister dated him for a little while.
Oh, really?
A hot minute, yeah.
Interesting.
Greg Easter Day or something like Scott Easter Day. Yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
This is in the mid '90s in the alternative heyday, and we were playing a show in Wichita, which, as anyone from Kansas can tell you, what are the two towns that everybody hates in Kansas? Wichita or Topeka. So
yeah.
We didn't want to go to Wichita, but we were playing a venue called the Aviator. This huge cavernous airplane hangar that they turned into a club. And when we got there, we counted a total of 18 people. But, hey, whatever. Not the least amount of people I've seen at a show before, so we just soldiered on. So we're playing a song, and for whatever reason, I was playing fretless bass in this band. My bass stops working. And what I realize is it has what's called active electronics, which means a battery powers the pickups. And the battery went out, which is like very unusual. These things, you change them once every 3 years or whatever. So I'm like, okay, hey, just play this one song we had called Autumn, which had kind of a longer intro. And I'll sit down on the stage and I'll replace the battery within this 2-minute window. I felt like, yeah, I can do this. So I sit down on the stage and I hear this kind of crunch sound, but don't think too much of it. And I get the battery fixed and I get back up to the microphone and stand there playing. And so we're doing the song, and the other singer, her name was Elaine, starts staring at me, and she's staring at my butt. And I'm thinking, why are you staring at my butt? And she kind of points, and my blue jeans are completely red because when I'd sat down on the stage, I'd actually sat on a broken bottle.
Oh dear.
And it had stabbed straight through into an artery.
Oh God.
So it won't stop bleeding. And so Scott's like, oh, we're going to take a break. So we go into the bathroom and we're stuffing paper towels into my pants. And I'm telling you, man, it's not stopping. Okay. And for whatever reason, I don't remember a whole lot more of the show other than we played it. We're done with the gig and we were driving back to Kansas City. And we had taken 2 cars and I was riding in Scott's front seat of his car, and we put all these towels down because I had been bleeding. And I remember, 3-4 hours later, whatever, we get back to Kansas City, and I step out, and again, I'm kind of woozy at this point anyway because I've clearly lost a lot of blood, but I'm youngish and don't know any better. And we get out and we take the towels down, and my blood had completely bled through and had covered his seat. And I swear to you, it had formed into the pattern of airplane wings.
Oh God. Oh God.
So that's the show I got stuck
at the Aviator.
At the Aviator.
Wow. Poetic justice. Yikes. Were there for every worst gig, was there ever a gig that should have been bad but was awesome? Like, oh my God, these few people are really love us. Or
all the time. That's why I end the book with the chapter "It's All Good," which is people who tell their worst gig stories that it turns to be into kind of a defining moment for them, a positive moment. Some of the best shows are ones that start terrible that you turn into greatness.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing this one band. Can I remember their name? I'm blanking on them right now. Oh, Vendetta Red was their name. Vendetta Red. They played at a venue in Lawrence, and they were touring with two other bands. And for whatever reason, their lead singer, his voice had completely gone. So the other bands would leap in at points during the show where he just couldn't do it, and they would finish the song or help the song or bolster it, and it became this really fun kind of crowd thing, you know what I mean? And for all these shows I've seen, for some reason I always remember that one as one of the most impressive to me, that they just kind of found a way to make it work.
Oh, that's cool. I thought there was a I don't know if it was a story from Semisonic or Dan Wilson or somebody in your book.
Mm-hmm.
But Jacob Schlichter, I think of Semisonic,
yeah. Drummer for Semisonic,
and sometimes keyboard player at the same time, was also authored a book that, or at least an essay on how people think that being a touring band is a profitable, enjoyable thing, but he did break down the economics of what an advance is, and
that's an incredible book too. Really,
yeah, tell me about it.
Rock and Roll Stars.
Yeah, okay. So it seems like there's the world of music and entertainment is something that people often observe, the highs and the peaks and the well-paid people, and then there's these other people who, yes, they are categorically rock stars, but they are really kind of indentured in indentured servitude.
More and more into debt. Because, he kind of pointed out even in the 90s that there was this, basically a version of payola that they got rid of in the 60s and 70s. But it was the same type of thing where you paid different stations, et cetera, to get your music on it. Yeah. And it comes right out of the band's, funds. And the bands typically don't even know what's happened.
Wow. Yeah. So you actually have you shared a personal story. So now would you please share your final worst gig story?
Yes. And everybody asked me, what's really the best story in the book? And for me, it's a story by Ian MacKaye, the founder of the bands Fugazi and Minor Threat. Most of these stories were either an in-person interview or a phone conversation, kind of a one-shot. This one, Ian and I spoke, I think 6 or 7 times on the phone, and I'd recorded each time because he wanted to make sure that this story was right. So the version in the book is kind of cobbled together of his kind of perfect telling of it. But Fugazi, are you guys familiar with Fugazi and Ian MacKaye and all that?
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You've talked about him before on the show, so yeah.
Excellent. Well, he's really one of the most DIY musicians of all time. Owns Discord Records, etc. Well, they were playing in Europe in 1990, kind of at the height of Fugazi-dom, and they were playing a show at the University of Warsaw in Poland. And as part of the show, they were staying at essentially a dorm on campus. So during the night of the show earlier, Ian decides he's going to take a nap. Well, while he's taking a nap, some skinheads had showed up at the venue to buy tickets, and they were turned away. And they were not happy with this. So they decided they were going to, protest. So they got together a few of their buddies, and by a few, I mean nearing 100. And they decided to march on the campus and find the band and discuss the fact that they wouldn't be attending the show. So Ian gets woken up by this Polish student, and of course, no one in their band speaks Polish, and most of the people there were speaking in some form of broken English, and saying, they're coming, and it's like, what's happening? Well, there is a jackbooted army of skinheads who are marching through campus, breaking out windows, and basically just attacking anyone they see, and they're targeting the band. So the band is put in this position where they've got to get out, but their van is parked there, and everything they own, all their gear, et cetera, and these guys aren't rich by any means, is in that van. So they had to navigate, as this army of skinheads is descending, them escaping and getting the van out. So some of them would be running up towards the street, and as a lookout, then they'd drive the van with the lights up and then run up another street. At one point, his brother had actually gotten punched in the face by one of the skinheads and said almost knocked him through a plate glass window. But eventually, they got out to the point where they could get back to the gig. And so the promoter is saying, so are you even going to play? And they're like, well, we're here to play. So they decide they're going to play this gig. And as you would expect, some skinheads show up to the gig, and it's a question of, what do we do now? We don't want the same thing to happen with more skinheads showing up at the gig, because at this point, the Polish riot police have entered the university to kind of break up this whole melee. Anyway, they decide, let the guys in. And as they do, they're scanning their IDs, the skinheads that come in, and they use them later to do a class action suit against all of them, it turned out.
Oh.
So to me, that is a crazy, scary gig. You're taking a nap and you wake up and it's people chanting in a language you understand, saying essentially, get out now.
Mm-hmm. What a nightmare.
Yeah.
Oh, what a nightmare.
Read the story in the book. It's really, the way he explains it, he goes into great detail. It's an awesome.
Oh, I got to get it.
If I was Ian MacKaye and the promoter had said, so are you even playing the gig? That would have been my out to go. Nope.
Yeah.
Not a chance.
If it was anybody but Ian MacKaye, they probably would have bailed. If it was Joe Satriani, he would have gotten on the plane.
Yeah. What's so fun, at least as the website depicts, there are so many different types of entertainment professionals who you've been interviewing for this, just the sampler, Blue Man Group, Bell and Sebastian, George Winston, Wyndham Hill guy.
Wynton Marsalis.
Yeah, Wynton Marsalis. That's so cool. Amy Mann. I think sometimes we think bad gigs happen to hardcore, rock and rollers and things like that. Have happened to everybody. Okay, so Michael and Richard.
Well, I guess I'm really going to bring it down, because we're going to talk about the station, the 2003 Great White fire at the station nightclub, which just seemed, obviously it was one of the worst gigs for so many people. That wasn't something that just probably could have been prevented, but just so many things went wrong to turn it into just this horrible tragedy, from the pyrotechnics being used improperly, to people not quite believing what they were seeing, to people all exiting from the trying to get out of the one exit, when they came, the place where they came in, to just everything involved in it, from it being overcrowded. There's so many different aspects that, if one or two things could have been changed, maybe it wouldn't have been so bad. But I guess that's what, when a disaster or a tragedy isn't just one thing, it's everything going wrong at once. And, the manager's decision to use, just to start it off, the pyrotechnics on literally the first song they were playing, that, some fiberglass backing material starts to catch fire, and this noxious smoke starts to fill the overcrowded nightclub, which has more people than it should, to bouncers not letting people out of the stage door that was for the band. And I remember seeing this back in the day and just thinking, God, this is so awful. It's so different than other huge tragedies. I was thinking about what it's like, just that feeling of being in a crush of people. One of the reasons why I've never gone into a mosh pit, why I've never thought to, I got to be in there with just this mass of people. This is exactly this is everything that could go wrong, but then you're in an even smaller space. And I think that, I don't know, it's just, Richard warned me before we were going to start recording. He's like, well, let's put yours on at the very end. so we don't bring everything down right at the beginning. And I don't know, so many people lost their lives, and so many people went to jail because of it, and it's just horrible.
Yeah, just so everybody, listeners, Michael knows the difference between worst bad gig and tragedy.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely, I think, from the not just the artist, but the venue and all those people where you know that the entertainment industry and the music industry can be challenging and at times completely bankrupt of any good intent. But most people go into it with the idea that they're going to make people's lives better with entertainment somehow, and to have much the opposite happen. It just must be awful for those people involved. Just horrifying.
I too think that, I think it was one of those things that happened so fast that it seems like the flames that kind of engulfed the nightclub happened within a couple of minutes. And that is just, it's just not enough time to react to anything. And I think it was just reaction and panic. And, unfortunately, so many people died.
Oh, yeah. So sad.
I was thinking about this when Michael brought it up to me. And it seems like anytime there's a concert tragedy, whether that suddenly there's a reaction within the industry of, oh, we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. And maybe that specific thing doesn't happen again, but it feels like that then something else gets ignored. So whether it's the Who in Cincinnati, where it was festival seating and we need to make sure that doesn't happen again, or, with the station fire with, I remember it being a big deal of make sure going to gigs, they would make announcements before the gig, a little bit after that, make sure you know where all the exits are. And it's not like that was the first big fire at a rock concert, or not rock concert, but at a musical performance. John Davidson was involved in a terrible fire, and I think it was Kentucky back in the 70s, where a lot of people passed away, unfortunately. And so it just feels like the industry says that it wants to learn its lesson about safety, but I ain't buying it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem like that the rubber's really meeting the road.
Mm-hmm. Whenever the P&L for that event determines, if you cut a corner here, then everybody's actually going to make money, then the corner is going to get cut.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, hey.
Also, Jeff, listen. Yeah. I know that in every case that we have an expert guest on here, that we're going down. So I was taking everybody down with us.
Oh, that's Michael. Very smart. Very smart. Well, Michael is not incorrect in that the odds are very often stacked in the favor of our guest because they are the nominal expert coming in, and Michael and Richard are kind of journeymen. They deal with this whole podcast thing, topic to topic, week to week. Well, this week ain't no different. Mr. Niccum came in and suitably trounced our guys. He kind of jammed on the it's kind of like getting dunked on 4 topics in a row, you guys. You, John, chose King of Shred, Joe Satriani, in a dalliance with the Malaysian army. A very kind of sad story about Graham Nash seeing his musical brother, David Crosby, fall deeper into his troubles with every show. The Timmons family and their record industry showcase, and how this rarely happens, but Gene Simmons saves the day on that one. And his personal story, being in the band Easter Day and bleeding out on stage in Wichita, that was rough. And then obviously the Ian MacKaye Fugazi Minor Threat story. So those are all, you would have heard little hammer sound effects. Those are all going on the Mount Rushmore of worst gigs. John,
Jeff, it didn't even feel like we were opening bands to John today. It felt like we were the people in the parking lot handing out cassettes of our work from the trunk.
You were kind of parking cars. I feel like if you're in the parking lot, you were waving.
We were the fans from Heavy Metal parking lot.
You totally. Oh,
That's who we were.
You were the
That's who
one
we
selling bootleg merchandise.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Have you seen the follow up? It was like there's like Neil Diamond parking lot.
I've seen there's a few of them. I think.
It was so funny. So, dudes, thank you so much for doing this cool topic. Jon Niccum, you have many hats that you wear. You're currently writing journalism for local outlets. Tell our listeners where else they can find your work.
You can find my work pretty much every week or two in the Kansas City Star. I do cover stories on entertainment, film, music, etc. And I also teach and write at the University of Kansas in Lawrence, Kansas.
Right on. Cool. So I'm going to implore everybody one more time to go to worstgig.com and you'll get a sorbet, not a sorbet. You'll get a amuse-bouche. You're going to get an appetizer of stories, and then you can do yourself a favor or give a gift to a friend by going out and getting a Worst Gig, the book, which is available where all fine books are sold. So, Jon Niccum, it was great to connect with you once again, sir.
Fun times, guys.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. This has been the Mount Rushmore of Worst Gigs Ever. I, as always, am Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.